Hello and welcome everyone to episode 14 of Tavern Talk. Calling this one Class Dismissed, mostly because we had a really fun time in our last Tavern Talk discussing a lot of character classes that, were really interesting to us, or we had characters that really kind of spoke to us or we held kind of in esteem. And when we got done, we realized that there were still a bunch of classes that we had not actually talked about. So we added the remaining pile, and Sasha and I are going to go through and sort that out. By the way, because I skipped a little ahead, this is Sasha, my ride or die here in Tavern Talk, and I am Ben, also known as Meta Mongoose, over on the Crit Cats Discord. Um, so if you ever want to hang out with us, just click on the links down below, and you can come hang out on our Discord and do fun things like talk about character classes or develop fun adventure ideas. We do that on occasion.
Or monsters or dungeons.
All of those things. But importantly, uh, we had a lot of classes that we talked about last time, but there are a few that we left out, and several of them actually kind of important to you, Sasha. Because the first one on our list that we left out from was the barbarian. And I know you have at least a few avid barbarian characters that you have played in the past.
I have. I've played one
Um,
in your game.
so barbarian, kind of a newer, well, newer in quotes, as far as my timeline is concerned. They rolled in around third edition in their most popular
Mm-hmm.
form. There were versions of barbarians beforehand, back when they were doing splat books for just about everything back in the first and second edition days.
Right.
But like the true barbarian class, as everyone kind of knows it, the I will rage barbarian of popular fiction these days. That seems to have been more of a third edition invention that has kind of passed on forward since then. Um, Personally, not a class that I've. I mean, I've played one or two, I think, but I've never really. It's not really a class for me, per se.
Yeah.
But I know you've played a few.
Mm-hmm. I I didn't really play him in 3 or 3.5. I didn't really even play him in Pathfinder either, because I did Pathfinder for a while too. I never really played him that much. I didn't start playing Barbarians until 5th edition,
Okay, so you didn't even you
and
didn't even do like the fourth edition barbarian.
I actually did not really get into 4th edition, so I don't know too much about 4th edition, but I've been told that it is not very good in the sense of the way 3.5 is and comparatively. Like it's not as good. But if you enjoy it, by all means, please love it. Please love it, please play it, you know. But I played it in 5th edition and I've had two or three different barbarians. One of them is in your current game if she ever becomes the barbarian, which has actually been a lot of fun. And I've played that type of barbarian before, which is the wild magic barbarian. Absolute fun. If you are chaotic like me, a lot of the times it is an absolute fun thing to have.
Because that's
And
the version of the barbarian where when you rage, you have like a little mini wild magic table
yep, you do.
to
You roll a
to kind of
d8.
roll on.
Mm-hmm. And whenever you activate your rage, you're supposed to, and it's per rage. So whenever you activate your rage, you roll that d8, and then whatever magic it is, it'll like describe it to you. It's got a table for it and everything. It was actually a lot of fun. I really do enjoy it, and I love using it with my characters. So like it happens, and my character goes, "Oh, I know what to do," and just like instantly does this. My first barbarian I think, was Nomageddon, which was your pre-made character in your little one shot that you made like a couple years ago. He was a gnome barbarian.
That sounds
He,
familiar.
yeah, it was for your where you were heading to, where that you recently got back from. It was like Archon or
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah,
We were testing out little
yeah,
Archon one-shot
cause
adventures.
cause you were like you were gonna run one or something, and you wanted to like test it to see what needed to be rebalanced or anything
Right,
like
because I
that.
had a two-ish hour time
Mm,
slot for
mm-hmm.
running an adventure, and I needed to make sure that it could be done in either a 2 hour or a 4 hour time slot.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, I used the shop to test run a lot
yeah.
of those.
I I ended up remaking him and turning him into Stoic Nomageddon, who was in a Ravnica campaign, and he was a total blast. Because he had big dog syndrome, being a gnome, and he was in the what clan was he in? He was in a barbarian clan. He was in the Gruul clan
Oh, from like the Ravnica, because
from the
he was
Ravnica
like the
setting.
Ravnica setting.
Yeah, and like that particular clan only takes like people who are like large size and bigger, but he happened to take down a giant and they were like, "All right, you're in."
Big
And
big
so
at heart.
yes. It was absolutely fun. I loved that character, and I don't mind barbarians. They're definitely supposed to be big hitters, and they're supposed to essentially be a they're more like a DPS or like a sponge style tank. They're supposed to soak
Yeah,
damage.
I've noticed that from the various design, like the design plays for Barbarian through the editions. During the fourth ed era, they were classified kind of like as a striker class. So their job was to do a lot of damage, um, and just like as quickly as possible. So the the barbarians that I'm used to are, and especially here in the fifth edition era, very hit point sponge. They do not do a lot of armor. It's just hit points and resistance during
Mhm.
rage,
Mhm.
to keep you up and moving. And it's, what's the biggest weapon you can swing around while raging?
Mhm.
Seems to be the par for the course for barbarians.
Yeah, that's not even including the zealot style barbarians that have it where they're still up despite being like technically down. They're
Hmm.
still up and going until the combat keeps going, and then when the combat's done, just fall over. Which are I haven't played that one, but it sounds very interesting and it sounds like a lot of fun. Where you have someone that would essentially use up every piece of ammunition that they got, and then by the end of it, they're just absolutely spent.
Yeah,
And
you
from
can just picture like this barbarian, like arrows sticking out of them in every which way, and they're still like just pushing down the battlefield.
yeah, is the ones that are like super scary. And as a DM's perspective, those are also wonderful because it's like, cool, we're done with that combat, and then like an hour later, go back into combat.
But but no, I've definitely as a DM, I do not mind barbarians. They are very handy, both to kind of use as a foil against some of the more traditional, uh, like armored or spellcasty kind of characters, because they just come, usually people who like to play barbarians tend to come with a different perspective that they bring with them, that helps kind of get a lot of party interplay going. um, that was my experience in fourth edition when my home table, my wife's friend played like a an elf barbarian, and she was very much the kind that would just drag the party into all kinds of adventure, uh, you know, sometimes kicking and screaming, um,
Yep, yep,
but
yep.
but I could always count on her to just be a simple hammer or shovel, just pushing things where they need to go.
Yeah, and even then with how they are, a lot of the times with barbarians, their dump stat is intelligence. So a lot of the times people tend to make them super strong and not very smart
That is
because
kind
they
of classic.
that is the common, like even
Then
in
there's
3.5
the
they have illiteracy as your main thing as a barbarian when you take it in 3.5.
yeah.
When you take barbarian first
They
level, you
did end
have
up dropping
illiteracy.
that at some point,
hmm
but
I'm kind of grateful for that.
yeah, because it added a wrinkle. Like it's cool if you want your barbarian to be that way, but some people like more the like noble warrior barbarians or like the kind of almost kindred like it's the almost not quite a shaman style, but like just
Yeah.
a someone who can communicate with the ancestors
hmm
and draw upon their power, but is otherwise a fairly standard person. Um,
I've I've also seen people use that like low intelligence in the fact where they use it for huge character flavor, and they'll make it where like they have a reason why they have super low intelligence and super low wisdom is because they had like either a childhood trauma or something that injured them severely, or something along the lines where they just don't understand how strong they actually are. And some of those stuff, like I like when people kind of use that and play on that. It's a lot of fun because it brings more character dynamic, and especially in 5e, you're very much more about making your own like seasonings, making your own flavors, making your own stuff up for your character rather than something like 3.5 is a
mhm.
lot more structured, a lot more detailed, a lot more you got to do this, this, and this, and this to get what you want. 5e is more like, yeah, do whatever you want, man. that's
And
that's kind
similarly,
of what it
like
feels like.
of our streaming group here, we have a player who did a barbarian that was kind of like the the trope of when not raging, very intelligent accountant, like kind of feel. But the minute the rage comes on, like the Macho Man Randy Savage voice comes out, and just like flipping a switch. Mild mannered accountant into pro wrestler mode. Just when once the rage hits.
It's it's pretty much that's how exactly how that works. That is
So,
exactly how that works. It is
um,
hilarious.
but no, like I said, I personally not a lot of experience in barbarians, but as a DM, somewhat enjoy them.
Yeah.
They are they are pretty fun to have, and just a different flavor of person swinging a big weapon around
Yeah. And I
than
would
you
say
would
give him
get.
a try. I'd say give him a try sometime if you get the chance to play instead of being a permanent DM. you know,
Well,
give him a try because you
that's the problem.
I don't know if I will run. I've run one game so far. I don't know if I'll run more or not. We will see. Because
but
definitely, I think between the two of us as DMs, you're a lot more structured. I am so much more improv and chaos. So
I look, we all improv and chaos is the soup of which we were all born. It's
everyone
only a
has
matter,
fun.
right?
Everyone has fun, and that's what matters.
You
That's
have
the
to
whole. That's the
you have,
whole
you have
point.
to crawl out of that primordial soup before you learn what structure is and why it's important.
If I can do that for most of my life, I might be able to do that for a D&D game.
But anyway, speaking of people swinging around weapons, we did not cover fighter last time.
Yeah, no, we didn't do that one.
Now, fighter, the arguably most basic of the character classes, statistically, the most made character class in all of D&D by the numbers. In fact, whenever Wizards of the Coast likes to, now that they, especially now that they own D&D Beyond, whenever they like to put out their numbers of what are the most made characters by our list of, like, because they have all the back end data,
Mhm.
and by far everyone and their mother has made a fighter of some kind. Everyone has made 10 fighters for
It
each of
is
their
the
friends who are learning to play D&D.
it is the basic
Um,
of basic.
right, it is, I don't know what to do. I've never played D&D before. What do I do? And you're like, guess what? Here's literally the simplest kind of character we can give you. Here's a fighter. You have a sword. You have a shield, probably. Here's some armor. Just have fun.
Now go out
It
there
is the
and fight them.
it is the tricycle of the D&D world.
Mhm.
Um, and but it's a very solid class. It's a very popular class. It offers itself a vast, deep array of ways to customize it to make it tactically interesting. Um, I really appreciated in the fourth edition era where they opened it up to where fighters got like actual powers and interesting skills to put them
Really?
basically on par with wizards. Because while wizards were
That's
casting
awesome.
spells, fighters had
Uh-huh.
maneuvers. So it was
Yeah,
like
I miss
so
that.
so it was like instead of just swinging your sword every turn, you could do like fun action movie style like attacks and actually manipulate the board and figure out what's going on and do like have cool mobility skills and stuff like that. Um, and while that didn't make the full transition over to fifth edition, Fighter got to keep some of it with the Battle Master and all of like the little maneuver dice that they get to play with. But Fighter also has a lot of other things that you can flavor in. Nowadays, we have access to things like your sword mages or arcane swordsmen or your arcane archers for sure. If you wanted to do more of a bow thing, they have different. You could take your fighter two-handed weapon style, pole arm. Each one of these very different, and especially now with the new 2024 rules that they came out with, all of the weapons come with like little abilities tacked on. So, being the person who has mastery of all the weapons, you can just mix and match all kinds of cool little weapon abilities that you can bring in to make your character even more unique. Um, so I like that about fighter. And somewhere in our past, we all have a fighter that we started out with. Um,
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
uh, I mean, as is tradition. My first character was a fighter. He did not last long uh, for various reasons, but my second character was basically a fighter as well, but with a different weapon. And from there, I've always had a good run of fighters. I've never had a problem. Uh, you know, in a game, just being like, I don't want to have to overcomplicate things. I've got a fighter that I can do no problems. You
Mhm.
flavor it up a little with maybe like a feat or two of interest.
Yeah.
Um, my my personal favorite fighter that I ever made though was a Warforged fighter that was basically the trope of he originally I was using that background generator that we've played with before here on Tavern Talk, and
Yeah.
his background was he started off being a wizard, like going to school to be a wizard, but he screwed up and accidentally got cursed somehow. And I decided that his curse was he accidentally basically shunted his soul into a suit of armor. So he was doing the Full Metal Alchemist Alphonse style, like I'm just a suit of armor. with a soul inside of it, kind of thing, as Warforged stats. And but he was a wizard, so he only knew how to use like a pole arm. He
Yeah,
just knew he just all he knew was the bow staff. So
right.
he was a suit of armor and a staff, and that was his fighter plan, and that worked out really well for a while.
Right? That that sounds like it would be. I haven't actually used a fighter with a polearm. I actually really haven't. Well, no, I haven't. I actually, surprisingly enough, that is a 3/5 class that actually is proficient with like spears and polearms and whatnot, and that's the only time I've really ever used a spear or anything. I have made fighters before, and I made a fighter in particular a long time ago. So obviously it was in like 3/5, and she was specifically made to be both long range and melee range. So she was a really good person from like fighter from afar, and then she would also be really good up front. And her normal was sword and board, so sword and shield, and then she would have either a short bow or a long bow,
Yeah.
and being kind of both of them. I technically have made two characters like that, but they're two very different characters. They just happen to have similar fighting styles. The only difference was when you said like maneuvers. I missed that from 3/5 with Book of the Nine.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's 3/5. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. 3/5 Book of the Nine Swords was kind of like the progenitor of basically everything the fourth edition fighter did.
Yeah, and I loved it. It's so much fun to have a fighter have that capability. A lot of the like the basic fighters now, they're basic. They're really meant to be those upfront fighters to begin with. They're the ones that you want to use. They're always the ones that are doing a lot of the damage, and some of them you can build them to be like really good tanks, wear heavy armor, make it where they're harder to hit, and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And over all around, they're kind of like the prime character to make. Like they're the prime class to take because they are technically the easiest to learn,
And you
in
know
my opinion,
they're
anyways.
and you know what they're effectively the protagonist character. Not
Yeah,
gonna
pretty
lie.
much, pretty much.
Um, as far as these, I will you will not believe how many times I've been like well you may because you've seen some of the art that I've shared whenever I'm sitting around a table on occasion of just
Hmm.
how many times I have taken and Google searched uh, fantasy app game protagonist chapter 1 and gotten to see like the low level like young adventuring anime boy with a sword and like some like cute leather armor or something
It's
uh,
true.
and and I'm just like, and this is my fighter. And
True.
then I just hit print, and I'm like, and now I just make a fighter to go with this picture, and then I go over to the table, and I'm like, I don't even know what this character.
It's
I don't
true.
know what
It
app
is
game
so
this guy is
true.
from. I just know
So
that he's
true.
like vaguely sandy blonde hair, one sword, maybe some leather gloves, a leather jerkin, some kind of like shorts or pants, and some boots. And he's just the fighter. He's got a smile on his face, and he's gonna save the world someday.
It's literally Spot the protagonist, and it's always the anime kid with like the super different colored hair that's spiked or in a different weird hairstyle.
Right, right. But this is
Yeah,
like
that's
chapter one
true.
protagonist. So like
So
he's like in his boring mode. Um, and then it's not till chapter 2 where he gets like the cool armor and weapons and like the fancy hair, and then
right.
chapter 3 when he goes like epic.
That is quite honestly true. When fighters are those ones that you get to see evolve over time too.
Hmm.
Definitely the protagonist style. They fit the protagonist narrative more than probably any other class. To be fair, that is pretty fair. It's a pretty fair call out.
Um, as an interesting design aside, so I've been watching uh, an anime recently called "Let This Grieving Soul Retire," and it's basically a an anime about like an adventuring party, and the main guy is like sucks at being an adventurer, but he wants to leave. But it turns out the rest of his friends are like the most badass adventurers that ever adventured, and they for some reason just think that he's you know as good as them, and just refuse to believe otherwise. And they've basically been dragging him along all this time. But
That's
one of his
fantastic.
friends. So in the basically just the intro video, like the opening credits, uh, shows the kids from like their children days pretending to be adventurers to their start as an adventurers to them being like super badass adventurers to them going like epic tier. So it's
Yeah.
so it's just like a little time lapse of them doing that. And if you watch the kid who's clearly the fighter of the group, he's like running around with like a stick in his hand, and then he moves up to like samurai version with like the wooden kendo stick, and then it's like the
Right.
super samurai version where he's got like 10 kendo sticks like sheathed in like every corner of like his belt, and then like the final form where his hair is like poofed out but he's only got the one like indestructible kendo stick. And I'm like,
Uh,
see, that's he learned. He made the full circle of
he
just
learned.
now.
He learned.
This is what happens to a fighter. You start adorable, and then you get kind of fun, and then you go overboard, and then in your epic form you're like, I have learned that I do not need to carry all the magic weapons. I have somehow converted all of them into one weapon, and I'm going to use it to cut the world in half.
Not sure how, but that's how it's going to go.
Yeah, that's that's fighters. So definitely do, just because they are the most basic class, and that is not a that is that is not a slight to them. They they are the most basic class, but they are in fact the best class for that reason. They are so easy to do anything you want with and have a great time. So definitely make time, make a fighter. You'll have a
They
great time with it.
they can be very fun and you can go various different ways. Fighter is actually pretty versatile in what kind of weapons they can use. So they pretty much have like they're proficient in like darn near everything. So like yeah, just be like, "Hey, you want a fighter that does like throws weapons or something?" Like you could do that. I'm sure there's a way to do it. And then fighters is like, oh, you want to use a bow. Well, there's the bow side that you can do. There's another fighter that goes, well, I want to do stuff that's more roguelike. Well, they've got stuff for that too. Like fighter is actually fairly versatile in how it functions.
Yeah, so definitely make some time. Do a fighter. Have and it's real easy, especially if you're having a hard time figuring out like what kind of fighter you want to do. Literally, one of my favorite things to do is just hop on Google image search and just type in like fantasy fighter art or fantasy D&D
You
art
you
for
will
a
find
fighter, and you
so
will
many.
find so many things
You will
that
find
you can
absolutely
use
so
as
many.
inspiration to build up any fighter that you want going forward. But anyway, moving on from fighter, something that I've had some more recent experience with, and you have had some really recent experience with, Monk. So, Monk, another one of those characters that arguably has been around since the second edition days, especially back since we've had like the Oriental Adventures books and stuff like that,
Mhm.
but didn't really come into its own until third edition. Um, and then uh, was definitely an option in fourth edition, and now in fifth edition, one of the main core classes that ends up in the player's handbook.
Mhm.
Um, Personally, have only recently played Monk. One of their problems that I had zeroed in on in the fourth edition era and the fifth edition era well, less so in the fourth edition era because literally everyone was balanced the same in the fourth ed era.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
in the fifth ed era specifically, their reliance on key points to kind of fuel all of their abilities and the severe lack of key points made you spend a lot of your time kind of like in a desert wanting water.
yep.
You're just
And it, yeah, it's also that thing too as well where you're wanting to do more, and since there's no like swift actions or free actions like there used to be in 3.5, now there's only bonus action and action, and you can only do so much in a turn. But monks are supposed to be like the super quick, super
mhm.
punchy, or super weapony type deal that are supposed to be quick with their jabs.
Well,
But
what I would have liked um, mechanically that didn't happen, and here's some design space that Monk could have played in. Uh, if they could have gotten more reactions than other
yeah,
people and had cooler things that they could do with their reactions. Um, you know, if you got like a base two reactions instead of everyone else's one reaction, and you could maybe you instead of just punching something as a reaction, if there was a some other class built ability that could be used as a reaction, so that when somebody does something, you would counter in the way that you know monks are known for.
and then there's
Uh,
also the a lot of the times the classic monk has always been like using their fists. 5e has been more about using weapons instead of their fists. Like you can
yeah, it's
use your
it's more of
fists.
the martial arts weapon masters
Yeah, like
was more of the aim.
yeah, that was what they I think that's what they were preferring for this version as like, wanting to use like a bow staff, a quarter staff, or using maybe some kind of glaive or
Right.
things like that rather
Things
than
that they
or
classified
even
as monk weapons.
or even just different weapons in general. They preferred the monk to be using weapons in this edition versus just punching. And so because I know back in 3.5 I made a couple monks, and it was all punching damage, but there was also like feats that you could get like ring the golden bell where you could essentially like shunt force energy towards somebody, depending on how like your wisdom modifier is like the distance, and you could actually hit from like medium range with a monk or farther depending on how high level I guess you are. But that's also 3.5. 5e, I don't mind them, but it is very much described. You're left thirsting in a desert,
Yeah.
looking for water, looking for more to do, and it's like I can really spot things, and then that's like all you got.
Hmm.
And
Now
the key pool is just not big enough in my opinion
the
because
2024 rules apparently hope to alleviate some of that. I'm curious. I've not yet seen someone put together a new 2024 monk to see how different they are. Other than just theory crafting, from what the new player's handbooks says. Um, but no, I've not actually played a monk until we did that Spelljammer game at the shop, and
yeah,
I got to play my ooze, my amoeboid monk.
I liked
Uh,
that character. I liked
I
Cruz.
liked Cruz. Cruz was adorable, but I honestly it was more a monk as a comedy than a monk as a serious character. Um, but I really ended up liking the character, but I don't know but I always felt like the class was letting him down.
Yeah, you're not wrong on that one. That honestly did that for me as a sorcerer, but that character was also a lot of fun. Both my characters in that game were a total blast. 10 out of 10 would play Giselle again.
Yeah, but no, you've experimented with monk recently as one of the versions of your character in my plane uh, scape game is a shadow monk. Um, how does
I've
that
done that a little bit.
how does that feel
Um,
compared to some of the other versions of the character that you like
Shadow
as well?
Monk. I've done Shadow Monk and I've done Hands of Mercy. Um, the Mercy Monk that like you
Hmm.
can punch and you can heal, which I think is what Cruz was.
Yes, that's what Cruz was.
But for the Shadow Monk, it is fun because it gives you roguelike abilities and it's a lot of fun to be able to be like, all right, cool. I'm going to use darkness and I'm going to use this ability so then that way I can sneak out or I can use it to teleport somewhere because I know there's the shadow teleporting
Hmm.
that monk gets. Um, it's really interesting. It's an interesting way to fight and it's an interesting way to do combat. Especially if you're in like a darker area, really helpful. Uh, it's a lot of fun playing the Shadow Monk, and I've also had fun playing it off with other characters. I also had fun doing that because I also had other characters that are like, all right, cool. I'm gonna like I'm gonna take this moment to make everything darker, or I'm gonna do this moment to make it where we cause a distraction and then I cast a darkness and then I proceed to just be like whoop, 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 and just like run away. and yeah, so it's a lot of fun. It's definitely a different experience than what I'm used to as a monk, but it gives you more options because when I think about some of the stuff that this monk had went through, which surprisingly in that game had been the longest one to not like reiterate themselves
Right,
essentially. And that was I don't I like monks, but I did not want to play a monk anymore. I was so tired of the monk. Not because of the character. The
right.
character, great.
Just
Loved the personality. It was the mechanics that were just
hmm
like not only were you thirsty in a desert, but you were also just bored. I felt like super bored with that one, and of the key points go out so quickly, so you really have to be like strategic in what you do with your key points, which I guess makes sense in a balance factor, but
yeah. Like I
it
said, I
makes
hear
it
the
difficult
new
to deal
version
with.
maybe gives a little bit more. So well, I'm curious to see if somebody wants to try a monk in one of my next games to see how
Yeah,
that goes.
I'm
Uh,
curious about it, but I don't know if I will right off the bat because I think I might try warlocks or rangers. I really want to see if rangers got improved.
I have a concept for one of the new Rangers that should
Uh-huh.
be a lot of fun. I'm looking for a place to give it a try at some point. But
Right.
uh, but leaving Monk behind, moving on to one of the other spellcasters that we left out, Sorcerer.
Yeah, I just brought one up.
Yeah. So Sorcerer, for the most part, is a creation of third edition. There wasn't really a different kind of wizard until third edition. Uh, and I remember when I first opened third edition Player's Handbook and I saw the sorcerer, like the just the art for the sorcerer class sold me on them immediately. And I think my very first third edition D&D character was a sorcerer because I was like, finally, I can play a magic character that doesn't spend their entire life reading books. Like it's about time that we
Exactly.
can finally deal with magic in an innate internal way and
Exactly.
not be like the study nerd to be the spellcaster of the group.
Exactly. Yes.
I liked that the guy they had doing the art, or as the art for the sorcerer was had that cool adventurer pose. It's like, oh, I got this burning hand in one hand and crossbow in the other. Like, let's do this. And I'm like, see, that's the guy I want. I don't want the guy whose like only option is to swing a stick at you a few times when his spells run out. I want someone who can actually fight, and that guy looks like he can actually fight.
True. I've had a lot of fun with sorcerers. I liked in that Spelljammer game, which was that recent one before
Hmm.
the one now. I had a lot of fun with that character. I went all out in making her very much the material girl, and,
Now,
and
what was the bloodline that you went with?
she at first was gosh, I want to
Because it wasn't the
say
draconic one, and it wasn't the
she
fey
changed it
one.
to draconic. I think it was the celestial one.
Okay.
I think is what it was. But we ran into the dragon. It seemed she was being more attentive to dragons, and it just like wasn't working. Like the stuff that I was doing with this character, it wasn't fitting with the character when she started interacting with dragons a lot more. So she got like really peaked into dragons, and I went to the DM. I was like, "Is it okay if I just change her bloodline to a draconic bloodline?"
Hmm.
And he was like, "Yeah, that's fine." I was like, "Because it just fits her better." And even then, like I was trying to make like a healing sorcerer, which is what the celestial one kind of focuses on, because that's kind of what was asked of, where it
But
was like, "Hey,
we didn't have a consistent cleric in that party, so like
yeah,
you
we
and me
didn't
were pulling like half duty, trying to heal
yeah.
people with my monk
Yeah.
powers and your sorcerer powers.
Yes. And it would have been good, but then it was just kind of like I don't need to be that. And then she started connecting with the little dragon because she was a fire genasi. So she was connecting with a sun dragon. Sun dragon's like, "You're warm. I'm gonna stay with you because you're warm." And so my character just kind of became its mom for a little while.
But no, I do like that sorcerers, basically draw their power from like a bloodline. Uh, I do like that there are lots of opportunities, not only for there to be plenty of bloodlines that just already exist, but also the template for how the bloodline plan works for them
Yeah.
is really easy to replicate to other things. So if you don't like the options that already exist, you
Yeah.
can basically just swap out whatever for the new thing that you want your character to have some kind of blood relation to, and kind of pick and choose the abilities and spells of how that kind of manifests.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I do like sorcerer. The downside uh, to sorcerer, I think, was that, well, in the fifth edition era, uh, I did not like that they basically used the same spell list as wizards.
Yeah, I didn't like that
Just
either.
very just more narrow. I didn't like that the basically the spellcasters went, here is the spellcasting list. Wizards get all of it. Sorcerers get some of it. Warlocks get almost none of it.
Yep.
Um, and that's the delineation between the classes is like what you have access to and how many spell slots you can mess around with it. I do like that sorcerers have the meta magic to kind of change how their
Right.
magic works.
Yeah.
Um,
Instead of like meta magic feats, instead it's meta magic like
your
abilities.
sorcerer points or whatever
Mm-hmm.
could be used to fuel different changes in all of your spells. But I really, back in the fourth edition era, everyone had their own stuff. So it was very easy to like delineate the difference between a wizard and a sorcerer and a warlock because all of them had their own power sets. They did their own things and they did their
Right.
own things in their own way. It was a lot
Mhm.
easier that way to kind of tell the feel of them apart. Uh, and I feel like some of that's lost in fifth edition, and the kind of, I want to say, the consequence of that is that sorcerers just feel like I don't know, wizards with some extra monk points to influence. It's like here, here's your wizard, but he gets key points. I'm like, oh no, not key points again.
Right, right,
They feel kind of like that, and I'm a little sad about that.
right.
Uh, but I don't know. Have you gotten to play Sorcerer in like third? Did you do Sorcerer in third edition at all?
Not in third edition. I think I didn't really make like a straight up sorcerer in 3.5. I know that I had characters that delved into sorcerer because of the abilities that sorcerer gives you, but I don't think I played a straight sorcerer before. I didn't. The only spellcaster I really focused in, especially in like 3.5, was druid. More than I did um in 3.5, but in 5e, I've made a couple sorcerers, and I actually find them very fun. But the only downfall that I personally have with sorcerers is that when they use all of their sorcery points, they are donezo. They're completely done. And a lot of the times, per combat and stuff, um, you don't have to burn all of your sorcery points, but they are definitely a glass cannon. They usually can pump out a lot of damage in a couple of turns, but then once they're out, they are super squishy, like wizards, which is kind of how they balance it, I believe. But
Yeah.
it's still they're still fun to play. Like I still love the different types of sorcerers that you can do. Because in 3.5 you really had to go digging if you wanted to do a particular sorcerer, or if you wanted the sorcerer to do a particular thing, or if you had your character wanting to do a particular thing, so you had to go into sorcerer to then go into a sorcerer prestige class, and like you're drowning in books essentially. But 5e, they're like, here you go. Here's these different kinds. Kind of like, what are you wanting to do? Here's your directions that you can go. And then they kind of released other books to give you other options, especially with other bloodlines too. I like that they offer more bloodlines because you can also do that so much with your background, with your story, your lore, your character. You can even do that in a homebrew world. Sorcerers are a lot of fun. I think that mechanically wise, they are a glass cannon, and I think they should be able to get their sorcery points on a short rest, like just their
Uh,
sorcery points.
yeah, they're not. Yeah, because warlocks get all their stuff back on short rest.
Warlocks do on
It's
a short rest,
not
but not
sorcerers.
sorcerers. And I know that technically that's what cat snap is for.
Yes, but that's wasting a spell slot,
Exactly. And it's like that's not
and not even like
worth
a
it.
bad spell slot, like a third level spell slot. That could be fireball.
But yeah, exactly. And that's kind of where excuse me, I see it for that. Is that they don't get anything. They have to go through a long rest, and like a majority of the classes get something, at least something back from a short rest. And I don't think fighters get anything on a short rest back either. I don't
Um,
think fighters do. Because I know
no,
they
I
have
don't think they
action
do
surge,
either.
but that's
Yeah,
that's
that's
during a
long
long
rest.
rest.
Yeah,
But fighters are also, they don't have to worry
yeah,
about,
they
oh,
don't
I'm
run
out of
out.
spells. They run out of an action surge, or they'll run out of an ability or something, or maybe a charge of something. But in all reality, they can still hit really hard and not have to worry about what like a sorcerer would worry about. So like a sorcerer to me, I feel like has too much of that. of that feel of
Mm-hmm.
like I've burned everything in one combat, and it's just like it really makes you, when you're, especially if you're like in a dungeon, you have to really decide if those sorcery points are important enough to use for those things. You really
Mm-hmm.
have to be,
And
what is it? You have to really be,
you have to ration. Be
you have
very
to ration
conscientious
it.
about these things.
Yeah, you have to be frugal with your
Yeah.
sorcery points. You have to be frugal with your spells. And that's not even including, I do like though that with sorcerers, they have the spells known. They don't have to go through, oh, I
Mm-hmm.
gotta write it in a book and I gotta learn it from a book and
Right.
everything. It's like, nope, my mom taught me it through her bloodline. Thanks, mom. And so, like, that
Uh,
just makes it easier.
and
But
yeah, there's that, and I'm pretty sure I haven't looked through the what sorcerers have going on yet in the new 2024 rules, but I'm pretty sure that like monks, they got topped off a little bit more,
yeah.
and or gave them some like maybe some short rest options. But we'll see. I I'm like I said, I'm looking forward to once we get the adventure we're currently in over,
Uh-huh.
um, seeing what fresher material kind of starts popping up in some of the games.
Yeah. I am interested. I don't know if I like some of it, but I am interested and I'm willing to look. And I actually took one of my other characters and made her a sorcerer to see what kind of sorcerer she would be. And she was still a blast to play as a sorcerer. She could fit as a sorcerer or as a warlock like perfectly. And I when I made her as a sorcerer, I made her think that she was a wizard. So she thought she was a wizard and she had a spell book,
Right?
and really, she just opens up this book and it's just scribbles. And then she goes, "I'm a
Yeah.
wizard. Here are my spells." And they're like, "What?" So I had a
I
lot of
don't
fun with that one.
I don't learn spells like you. I make them up and I write them in my spell book. And you're like,
Exactly.
you're
I'm a
developing
better
sorcerer
wizard.
powers is what you're doing.
I'm a better wizard. You're
I'm a
not I'm a
prodigy.
better
I'm a
wizard.
genius. I'm a
Yes.
prodigy.
Yes. That's how I portrayed her. Where she's like, I'm the better wizard. I'm the better wizard because clearly I write it in the book. What are you doing? You're learning from a book.
Right. I'm the author.
Yeah,
This book
it's
is
so
just
good.
scribbles.
No, it says fireball. What? Cast fireball.
Anyway, moving on from sorcerer, one of the other classes that kind of falls to the wayside, mostly because it was a late addition along the way, artificer. So I'm pretty sure that artificer has been a late comer in every edition that it has existed in. Because did Artificer even exist in third edition? It had to have, right? There's like a million splat books.
It might have. I wouldn't say no. I would say that more than likely it was there. I know it was definitely there in 3.5. I, however, have never made an artificer, so I
Me
know
neither.
of
Well,
them. I know of
that's
them.
true. I've never made an Artificer. Um, so I like the concept of Artificer. The problem, at least for me personally, is that every time I think I want to make an Artificer, what I really want to do is make a gunslinger fighter, which is a subclass for fighter, which means I don't have to make an artificer. Um,
Perfect.
so, but I like the concept, and I did have a player once who had an artificer, and we had a ball together. He, we were doing I think it was during the, what adventure was that? The one in the jungles of Cholt. Um,
Oh,
anyway,
oh, no, 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 no. I know
the
that
the
one, but I
Tomb of the
don't know
Nine
that one.
Gods or whatever. Yeah, that
Is it
uh,
Tomb of
Tomb
Annihilation?
of
No,
Annihilation.
no. Yeah,
No.
that one.
Yes? Yeah, because
Yeah?
it's not Tomb of Horrors. Tomb of Annihilation. That
Yep.
one. Uh, so they were
I knew a couple
exploring the,
games like that.
but we were exploring the tomb. For the longest time, he was an artificer, and he was the kind of artificer that had that built like a little minion. But like this was before some of the updates where the minion just didn't scale properly at all. I think this was even during the like um kind of like the unearthed arcana versions of the artificer before it became a functional real class, and he was kind of using that, and it just wasn't scaling right, and it wasn't scaling right. And there was a spot in the adventure where like the there was a trap of sorts, and there was like one of the things that could happen is like there's this flash of light, and whoever was dealing with the trap just disappears for an amount of unknown time. And there was a at that point I was like, I'm gonna fix this. I'm gonna fix this right here and now. So he was investigating the thing when it went off, and I pulled him aside and I was like, you end up in a in a strange room. And he opened it up and was exploring, and it was this weird inventor's almost arena, almost like Iron Chef style, where all of there's this big every morning there would be this big room where like all this junk would just rain from the ceiling, and all of these people would be diving in and grabbing stuff, and it was all really amazing, like rare materials that you would never see in the prime material plane. And he realized that like he's while he like he it kind of overtook him that he was supposed to be inventing over and over and over and like reiterating and reiterating, and this guy would keep coming over to his room every evening, and seeing what he had made that day, and mostly just judging it as terrible.
Yeah.
He'd look at it and go, it's trash, and then he would leave. Like and he's like, and I'm like, and
It
this goes
sounds
on.
great.
This goes on for days, weeks, months. You don't even remember the when how long it has been since every morning you get up and you go to this room and you pick up as much you're in the fray with all of these other weirdos, grabbing all this weird stuff and bringing hoarding it back to your room, and then spending the rest of your time building this thing until the knock on the door when the guy shows up and he looks at your thing, and you keep hoping that one day that he'll say it's not terrible, and every day he says it's trash and moves on. This goes on and on and on and on and on, and then one day you finish what you think is your masterpiece, and he looks at it and he goes, it's not trash. And this feeling overwhelms you, and and then like in this moment he kind of pops back in where the party is, and he has this effectively mechanized polar bear as his kind of companion now that he has built out of like its eyes were astral diamonds, and its skin was like this like fluid marble, and this
Yeah.
weird stuff that you can't find on the prime material plane. uh, and it had like a siege mode where like a cannon would like come out of its mouth and shoot at people. And but basically I took the stats for like the thing that his character could normally make, and just kind of moved them in line with the level of character that we're dealing with now.
Right.
um but like he really took it was the best part was the internals of the polar bear were a refrigerator, and it's where they kept their kegs of ale.
Right.
It was his beer bear.
That's
um
fantastic.
but I had a lot of fun with that guy and his artificer. I have not run across too many other artificers playing games that I have enjoyed sharing time with. They all, in my opinion, just kind of basic. It
Yeah.
just doesn't feel like I don't. Artificer is cute, but I don't know if it fits D&D correctly.
I'm not sure because it is essentially a different kind of wizard. It is a different it's the engineer wizard, the one that
Mm-hmm.
wants to build, their stuff instead of learning spells through that. They want to put it through and use like tools instead. I actually have a player who is an artificer in my game. And he doesn't sit there and spend time like making items all the time, or because some artificers will study all of the magic items as much as
Mm-hmm.
possible so they can replicate them and then kind of like make their own and customize as they see fit. This one is a little more basic, as he built his own magical armor and built
Mm-hmm. Did
his
the like
character's
the Iron Man
spouse's
suit
armor.
style?
Yeah, and that kind
Um,
of stuff. And it was and it kind of just depends on what you're doing with it and where you're going with it. But it is pretty much the engineer wizard, the in all honesty kind of the more almost steampunky style wizard,
mm-hmm.
where
It's
I
Matt.
I I
I don't know
think
how much I like my Magitech in my D&D.
I think it depends on the
It's a
setting. I
setting. It's
think
a
it's
setting
a
thing.
setting thing. And I think it's like, you can have artificers fit perfectly in your realm. You can have it, fit some places, but there are just some places where like an artificer just doesn't work. And the artificer can't necessarily do what they're trying to do with a lot of like how it's speculated in the book of what you should be doing. They kind of, because the book will be like, oh hey, you could do this, or you could try for this, or artificers tend to do this or this, to kind of give people a basis on if they want to try and make a character and base it around that. But it
Right.
is very much a setting type thing, because there are games that are like that, where they're kind of that cyberpunk or magitech or something along those lines, where technology and magic kind of fuse together. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with it. I think it's really interesting. But for the artificer class itself, I think it really just depends on the setting.
Yeah, see again
And
the
that's
biggest
probably
the
its
biggest
its
hang up
con.
that I keep
Yeah.
yeah the biggest con I keep running into is every time I sit down and go, today's the day. I'm gonna make an artificer, and then I think about it for like 2 seconds, and I'm like, no, again, all I really want is a gun in my D&D, and to do that I can just be a gunslinger fighter or
Yeah. Mhm.
um or just or not even a fighter, just like any
Essentially, yeah.
well, I know that Percy from Vox Machina is technically the gunslinger fighter, right?
Yeah, he
But if
technically
you
is.
but if you watch the
He's more like a
cartoon,
rogue.
well, if you watch the cartoon on TV,
I've seen
um,
it. I haven't watched the newest season yet, but I have seen it.
with if I knowing almost nothing about Vox Machina, um, as I was never a watcher of that particular stream group, so I didn't know all of their character classes by heart. I looked at him and went, "That's a warlock. His fancy gun, that's just Eldritch Blast.
Yep.
He just happens.
That
It's just the character is a warlock. The DM let him have a gun, and whenever he doesn't use real bullets, that's just him using Eldritch Blast out of the gun." And his like weird kink is that he likes to invent things, and sit around and like, you don't need to be an artificer to be the guy who sits around and like tinkers with his gun all day, or like
Yep, yeah,
makes
that's
like
true.
weird inventy drawings. You don't need a whole class for that, is the problem I keep coming back to. but
I
but it
can
is
see
a
that. Yeah.
but it is a class that people do enjoy nonetheless, and it does fill a niche for those who enjoy it. So I'm glad it's there, but just it's one of those classes that I never can bring myself to be like, and today I'm doing it. I'm making an
I Yeah,
artificer.
and like even then, even then with that, sometimes it feels like artificer should just be a different archetype of wizard rather
Well,
than having its
they
own
kind of
separate class.
were ish when we did the original like Unearthed Arcana. They were like a subclass of wizard.
Yeah.
Um, and this is the problem with some of these classes is that they're not part of the original design of like when when we make you know when we go from second edition to third edition, there's the classes that are going to be in the player's handbook,
Right.
and then there's the classes that are going to come later. And the classes that are going
Right.
to come later are not as iconic or as interesting as the classes that started the line, because
Right.
those are the ones that the game is designed for. And the ones that come later are kind of like shoehorned in where there was space. And that's a if Artificer was there from the beginning, I feel like they could design space, they could carve out a niche for it in the beginning. And then it could feel like a legitimate class that, and there are other classes that have this problem. Well, in fact, we can talk about them now in our, because we got some little extras section here. Um, so one of the classes that keeps being a perennial also there, psionicist.
Yeah, that's true. I actually did
Um,
not delve into psionics very much.
well, there's a reason for that, and that's one because by the time they pop up in any given edition, uh, nobody's interested, or the people who are again begging for water in a desert, wanting their psychic classes, immediately jump on them, but everyone else is like,
Uh-huh.
I've got all this other stuff. I don't need that.
Yeah. It
Um,
it yeah, that's kind of what it came down to with I didn't really
and they don't.
3.5 was big in psionics. Like there was a whole book on
Oh no,
psionics and
every edition until now has had a solid psionics component, just too late. Like
yeah,
second
and
edition had the psionicist. It was, I'm not going to say it was a bad character class because it was, a thing, people played it, but like it tried to do the spell system differently, which I applaud, but in a way that was kind of broken, and they didn't care because it was the end of the edition.
right,
um
right, right.
third edition, the psionicist didn't roll around until much later in the edition cycle, and whether it was good, bad, indifferent, by the time it rolled around, all the fans had already kind of sorted themselves into their appropriate niches.
Right.
Fourth edition, everything was balanced, so it was as equally good as all the other classes. The problem was it didn't show up until the third player's handbook, is when all the
Really?
psionic stuff showed up, which was like tantamount to like a hop, skip, and a jump to the end of the edition.
Oh no.
So
That's so sad that they wait until it's ready to be like dead and buried and before they even try to.
and then and that's when they started designing for psionics, which I don't. And then fifth edition came out. We didn't get a psionicist right out of the gate. Psionics was not a. They didn't carve out any space for them, and this is a problem that happens for a lot of psionics classes, and people who like the psionics classes, they have to wait forever or fix it their own, like spot weld together a psionicist out of some other classes, and you can do that now, like the great old one packed warlock, or they've got an aberrant mind sorcerer, which is kind of like their psionicist fix
Yeah.
now in so there are options, but that's not. I've had a lot of sit downs with a lot of players who are like psionics fans, and that's not what they want. They want actual psionics. They want it carved. Like if I were designing, I would carve out uh, a chunk of the spell list that only psionics can do, and just be like, this. If you want to do these things, if you want to use, if you want to, move stuff with your mind, use your telekinetics, you want to, you know, do your mind reading powers or whatever. We're just saying that that's just what psionics is. It's not magic. It's weirder for some reason than magic. I don't know. I'd rather it not even use spells in the traditional sense. But I
Yeah.
but I don't know like a good. The biggest problem is getting two people who like psionics together to agree on what psionics should be doing.
Right, right. That is true. I know that judging from I think the only thing I ever made was like a soul knife, or I knew somebody who made a soul knife, which was in 3.5. I know that it's a lot of the times the rules had come up on a consistent basis when it come to psionics because of how psionics work.
Mm-hmm.
And I like psionics because I think that is a really interesting take and a really interesting way to have another type of combat, another type of trial, or another type of situation for that. So
Well, I just
I
like
think
that it's a
it's
different attack method.
right. I like that. Well, I
I
like
like
everything that
attacking
comes with
versus
it.
I like attacking versus the mind.
I
Um,
I like having it because I also like having it as a DM, where now it gives my players different challenges that a psionicist would have to deal with. So I also like those kind of different things that you can do because it just adds more flavor. But
yeah.
it also brings different forms of combat and kind of different type of characters and backgrounds and all that
Hmm.
stuff. Like it kind of adds more flavor on top of it.
But yeah, like again, I in the last few months, I did participate in a multi-page long fight in D&D Beyond with other people who were going on and on about psionics, and yeah, it's really hard to get two people who want a psionicist in the game to agree on what that should look like
Yeah,
mechanically. And that
that's
may be
true.
why it takes Wizards of the Coast so long
Yeah,
to get
that
around
would
to
make
designing
sense.
them.
That would definitely make sense because of it really has to do with the structuring of psionics and how they're handled and how they would be handled in games.
Now, one of my favorite classes from the fourth edition era that, in my opinion, is a crime that it did not make it into the fifth edition era, though I do understand why it didn't make it into the fifth edition
Right,
era.
right.
But again, a crime was committed. The Warlord. If you're unfamiliar, the Warlord class was effectively a non-magical class. So imagine like a fighter,
Uh-huh.
but they spent a lot of their time making other party members do things during
Right.
fighting. So like instead of me attacking
Oh.
on my turn, I could be like, "Hey, barbarian, there's an opening. Swing your axe." And the barbarian would get
Yeah.
another attack on my turn.
That's that's really similar to it's actually similar to a marshal except not
Mm-hmm.
where a
Oh
marshal
well,
would be
Marshall from third edition era was the progenitor of the warlord in the fourth
yeah.
edition era.
Yeah. Where it was like, hey, there's an opening, go swing there, is pretty much what the marshal did. The
Right,
marshal's like, hey, I see an opening, hit them over here,
right.
which is a very like tactile style combat
Or
person.
they were also kind of like a secondary healer as well. Like they were the martial healer. So like
I did
you
love
know
the
I
auras.
liked
The
well
auras
no
were
they
beautiful.
didn't have an aura per well in fourth edition it was more of a
Yeah.
like one of their abilities was just you yelling at your ally to just rub some dirt in it. It's like get up, rub some dirt in it, you're fine. And then
Walk it
that
off.
and then yeah, walk it off. and and then you healed, like you rolled some healing dice and they just got better because you yelled at them like a they're like a coach, really. They're like a football coach.
They're like a coach
Um,
or a drill sergeant.
yeah,
That was what I always thought of, was like a drill sergeant. That's always what I thought of
but
whenever they yell.
I loved the concept of a character that could make the other party members his Pokemon. And I'm just like, hey, Rogue, you and the barbarian, you go low, he'll go high. Sandwich them now, and then
Yeah,
like both of them get an attack in. This the Rogue gets sneak attack. I can move. I can, instead of moving on my turn, I could use an ability that made one of my party members like shift around to a more advantageous position.
yes.
Um,
Oh,
like these are things that I loved as a warlord. I loved playing a
yes.
warlord. It was the
And
best.
as an offshoot, there was a martial prestige class style that was called it was in one of the dragon books where it's like the dragon warlord, where instead of it being like other party members, you can get your real life Pokemon and use dragons. And you
Oh,
could end up commanding dragons. And that's why I really love that one. So you said warlord immediately. Boom, dragon warlord.
hmm,
It because I absolutely loved dragons in 3.5, so I made like so many of the dragon style characters. And that one, it's like boom, dragon warlord. I command dragons now, and I'm gonna use Charizard, use Fireball
right.
on the whole entire field. Uh, so like that's
Um,
exactly how I
no, there
really
was
envisioned
a
that
so
one.
back one of the other things that I enjoyed that you can't really do well. I guess if Wizards of the Coast made a better version of the D&D Beyond character builder, you could do it. But during the fourth ed era, their online character builder had a way you could hybridize character
Uh
classes.
huh.
So it wasn't like a Gestalt kind of thing where you played like two classes at the same time.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
different, where like you kind of picked and chose what you liked from each class at each level and just kind of like cherry picked the parts you wanted as you went,
yeah. Instead
of
of
two different
Gestalt.
classes instead of like getting both at the same time. And I made a warlord bard that was what I considered like a princess build. They spent all of their time just insulting people and telling people to do things for them.
Like a princess would.
You know, there'd be some cutting words at the enemy. There'd be like oh, if you could just stab him for me, that would be great. You just
Be the
order around the party, just stand
be
there in
the
the middle of combat.
literal be the literal princess
Yeah,
standing there ordering party members
yeah,
to do
you're
things.
just ordering party members around and like occasionally saying nice things to them to give them like little buffs and just being mean to the enemy monsters
That
to debuff
sounds
them.
that sounds fantastic.
Oh, it was a great
I
time. It was a
I
great
very
time.
much enjoy that idea. Don't give me future character
I'm
references.
I'm very sad that you can't do that as well because like nowadays if you were to do that in like fourth ed or in fifth ed you'd have to basically just play a bard or like some kind of like weird warlock. Uh, but but I just liked the ability to make uh, make my other party members do things advantageously. Because it both helped me when I was playing with players who maybe were newer at the game and maybe weren't working as strategically as I would have liked. But we're all having
Mhm.
fun, so I don't want to be like, "Hey, you're not doing it right." That would be mean. But as a warlord character, I'd be like, "Hey, by the way, I want you to shift two to the left, and I want you to stab that guy because I'm the warlord and I say you can do that." Wouldn't it be great if you did that?
I actually did stuff like that before too, but it wasn't through that warlord option. It was through the marshal, as I had
Hmm.
one of my characters who was the fighter that was the long range and the short range. I had her also be a marshal. So when she was up front, she was like, "Hey, look, it's opening. Go cut. Hey, look,
Yeah,
it's opening. Go hit with club. Go do that now. I'm going to push you over here and make you hit them over there."
yeah. The best part about the warlord abilities was not only did like your the powers usually read something like, you know, you have one of your allies make an attack roll, and if they hit, they also get like bonus damage equal to like an
Yeah.
extra d6 or d8 or whatever. So it's like, I could stab you with my short sword for a d6, or I could have the barbarian hit you with his two-handed axe,
Right.
and also do an extra like d6 or d8 damage on top of that.
Right.
So no, I loved the Warlord, and it is a crime that I don't get to do that in fifth edition. And I have
They
uh,
maybe they might release something. You
they
never
won't they
know.
they won't. I it I'm holding out
Try to
for
be
like
positive, Ben.
I'm holding out for sixth edition, like a decade from
Yeah.
now,
Like a
when
dick.
because we did fifth edition as the base version for like a decade, and then the 2024 rules are going to go until probably 2034, and
Yep.
then by then they'll be like, all right, we've basically reprinted everything in the new 2024 rules, we've milked what we can from this, it's time for a new edition change. And I'm really
It's
hoping that
it's time
somebody,
it's time we now dig into psionics and then release a
yeah,
psionics
yeah,
book.
you'll know the edition is coming to an end
When
when we
they release
start
a
getting actual psionic characters. Um,
it's
when
true.
when when the Sionis class shows up for real, that's when you know that it's about time. It's the canary in the coal mine.
Yep, it's that. It's the servers are closing, the servers are shutting down.
Uh, but uh, but yeah, so that's I'm not gonna get it for fourth ed, or for fifth ed. I've seen a lot of uh, other followers of the way of Warlord, uh, on in the homebrew lands, cranking out their homebrew versions of the Warlord class,
Yep, yep.
and I've seen them. I appreciate the effort, but it is not what I want. It's as close as you can get in fifth ed, but it is just not. It's not what I want, and so I'm gonna have to wait until like sixth ed rolls around and hope that whoever the head designer is at that time, uh, looks back in some of like the fourth ed books and goes, we had a good thing here. We should really look into this a little bit differently.
Right, right.
And then maybe I'll get my warlord, but I don't. I'm not holding out hope.
Final send off. And then they have the new 5e stuff come in.
Yeah.
They release a book that has the warlord and the psionicist, and they just
Yep. That's when I know. That's when I
transitions.
know that it'll be time to.
Exactly.
Edition's changing,
Exactly.
everyone.
Like, yep. It's the death of a bachelor. It's happening.
Yep. So so any other classes that any of the weirder ones from like your third edition
Um,
days that
my
that
three
that we
five
haven't
days. My three
covered?
5 days are like the prestige style classes. I know that there were quite a few. Excuse me. There were quite a few like rogue ones. Because there was even like a alternative rogue in. I don't remember what book. Might be Complete Champion or Complete. It makes it where you can sneak attack constructs and undead. Um, and I don't remember. I just remember that it's a type of rogue. Um, there's some really weird ones out there. Like if you like with 3-5, if you are looking for something very specific, well, I
You'll
have
find
news
it.
for you.
There's a
You're
splat
gonna
book.
find
Yeah,
it.
there's
You gonna find it.
there's there's a splat book that has it in there. I'm
Yes.
sure.
Like that's actually when, and that's why stacking it so much with 3-5. I would say that there are one class. It's another. I guess I used miniatures in 3-5, which is where the marshal came from, and the healer had come from. Um, Now, granted, I'm not huge on the alignment portion when it comes to D&D as a whole.
Hmm.
3-5 was
It's a
three
bit of a relic.
five was all about your alignments. You had
Hmm.
to be this alignment in order to get this class. You had to do this in order to get that. And I played healers. And I loved being a healer. I loved being a full-on healer that was extremely squishy,
So this
could not fight.
is this the class healer?
Yes.
Okay, so this is not this is
So,
legally distinct from a cleric.
yes. Straight up, it is straight up called healer. It is in the same book, the miniatures handbook. It is the same book as that where it
Now, is that
has
the
the
one that
healer
people like to
class.
take that had like kind of like some kind of weird pacifist restriction?
Yes, you
Um,
had to, if you knew someone on the battlefield was a good character or like good aligned, you had to heal them. You had to make sure that they didn't die. Like you had to, like, no malice towards them. And if you did, you lost all your abilities as a healer because you essentially broke your vow to
huh.
the
Whatever
divine
divine powers is feeding you.
energies that you get fed this stuff. So, I a lot of the times when I played that, I always went to my DM and I was like, hey, can we just remove the pacifist portion? Not necessarily that the healer is going to, oh, yeah, I'm not going to heal you. It's more along the lines of like, this restriction is really stupid. Can we not have this really stupid restriction? Because 3-5 was really, really potent. If you didn't follow your alignment, you would lose everything of your class.
Hmm.
And that was like for me 3-5's like biggest pet peeve that I have, because it's like, oh, you did something that may or may not be debatable as lawful neutral or neutral good
Well,
or
yes,
chaotic good.
it was arguing with the
It was
DM.
so, yes,
Uh,
it was so debatable, and
yeah, it
depending on your
was.
DM and how crazy they want to be just depends on
Yeah.
if it works or not. And that's why it's like, it's like the DM would be like, that's maybe what I would consider neutral, but I'm going to take away their powers anyway. So like, that's what I don't like about those restrictions. And I'm really glad that like I said, didn't play fourth ed, but
They
in
dropped it
fifth
in fourth ed
edition,
in a heartbeat.
yeah, and in fifth edition, it's there, but it's not necessary. And I like that because it, again, it gives the player more freedom to actually make a
Hmm.
character and not have to follow a paper guideline of what you're supposed to do.
Yeah,
I didn't
fifth
like
ed
that.
got that from fourth edition because in fourth ed there was technically alignment, but it was mechanically worthless.
Uh huh.
And for those who wanted to opt out of that entire like alignment system, your character could just be unaligned,
Yeah,
and then you could
yeah,
just be
that's
like,
true.
I don't subscribe to whatever this is.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yes.
when fifth edition came around, they got rid of like the way for players effectively to be unaligned. Like most monsters are just unaligned if they're not evil or good. That's kind of like they don't just say monsters are neutral. They're just unaligned.
Yeah,
They don't
yeah.
follow an alignment. They're a wolf. They don't pay
Yeah.
attention to
Their
this
alignment
alignment,
is nature.
right? Or they're
but but
some
yeah,
monster,
with
but yeah, they dropped the alignment restrictions like
mhm.
all straight
Yeah,
outside of like a
with
few very rare like heroic items that were like I only traditionally I only let good people touch me,
right,
and
right.
on the DN side you're just like okay, the
I
party gets
actually
it, like
I
that's
actually
it's
had a
fine.
cleric like that. I actually had a cleric like that. That was an awakened animal. He was a dog, and he was a cleric, and he worshipped the mood god in that realm. and he didn't like anybody petting him unless it was his god or if it was children. He did not care if it was children because children do not know better. So he's fine with it, but if an adult literally comes up to him, he will be like, "Don't you touch me." And like so I had that. But as a healer, it's probably been my most fun. And I think the reason is because I got to do so much more like role play, but also at the same time I've been able to do like some really cool things with a healer, because a healer is just a straight up divine caster and their main focus is healing or divine protection and that kind of thing. And so like in the book they're kind of held to like this really high lawful good pacifist type persona, and the only thing they can really wield is like a spear, which is the only character I ever made knew how to use a spear. So like their base attack bonus structure, they cannot fight at all. They are I think a wizard hits better than the healer does, but it's a really fun class because they are meant to be in the back and they are usually a good target because people understand like, oh, these ones are keeping these people alive
Hmm.
and
And
they
they're not
have
fighting.
so many. And they're not really fighting, and they kind of do. They have some of the abilities, but it's very limited as they're not really meant for it, which is where their little trope comes in of like, if you know that your enemy across the battlefield is good aligned, you have to go over there and heal them or else you lose all your abilities. And so that's why like I really enjoyed it, mostly because I also like really broke that character with healing. I mean, I was a really good healer. And I even made him like a doctor. I made him go into medicine. So not only was he a really good healer in the magic sense, he was also a very intelligent person who also was a really good doctor. So like even if he didn't have his magical capabilities, he can still perform daily medical
Hmm.
duties as needed without even having to use his magic. So I made him like versatile in that sense where in case something happened he still had capabilities to heal. But it's probably one of my more like offshoot classes. Same thing with like your draconic classes. I love the draconic classes in 3.5. They are an absolute blast. And I wish that 5e would have had more like separately, but
Uh,
they didn't,
the
not
best one
really.
you got right now is the Drake Warden Ranger.
And that's about it
And
though.
then your dragon blooded sorcerer.
Right, but that's really
And that's
about
that's
it. Is more
really
like
your only two,
archetypes
yeah.
versus like a genuine class like you would have as a, because like a barbarian essentially is just an angry fighter. Like that's literally
Right.
all a barbarian is. So it's like you would have then you're like your dragon person that's the same type of class just in a different flavor. So that's why they kind of released the archetypes for the different classes instead of making class after class after class, which I understand. As it shows in 3.5, it becomes a lot, and people will do whatever they can to like break a character and dive into 6+ classes to do all these 10 different things in one turn. And 5e kind of takes that away, which personally I think is a good thing, because a lot of the times with 5e, you multi-classing isn't necessarily the best route to go. Usually, a lot of the times, your straight class is probably one of the smarter things to do rather than multi-classing, because multi-classing is a bit of a pain because of how leveling up works and how doing your feats and doing your ability scores and whatever is a lot different comparatively.
Yeah.
And it's really easier just to be like, pick a class, go for it. And that's kind of how I do in 5e a little bit. I haven't really delved into multi-classing very much at all. But that's kind of the other classes that I really thought about, which are, it kind of just depends, really. Um, some of them are just like an absolute blast. Some of them I feel like we went over a ranger before, and
Yeah, Ranger was in the last
I
week or
really
last
feel
last
like
episode.
in fifth edition, Ranger just did not shine like at all. Like out
It did
of
not.
all of them, Out of all of them, it just did not shine. And I really like the Ranger class because again, in 3.5, I did so much with a Ranger. I went into Ranger stuff and I did a lot of animal stuff. I did stuff like Beastmaster and stuff to like increase animal companions and really kind of build your own small animal army as a Ranger. And then going into Druid, and then you have a Ranger Druid thing where you're kind of like a master of the
Hmm.
forest or whatever terrain that you prefer. And Rangers just didn't shine in fifth ed. They just didn't. Like
Um,
they're forgettable. Like I
yeah.
forget a ranger exists half the time until I need something that a ranger has at, but even then a ranger
Well,
is just okay until
one
higher
of the biggest
levels.
issues with Ranger specifically was when they designed it to excel at the one leg of the adventuring stool that nobody cares about, or at
Right.
least that there are not enough people put enough effort into, which is the travel part,
Yeah.
the exploration part. Because like all of the fun, like close up exploration, that's the rogue's job. And all of the fighting things, that's the fighter's job. And
Right.
the traveling from point A to point B, and like dealing with the travel, effectively the travel montage, right?
Right.
That's unfortunately the travel montage was the ranger's job.
Yeah, and that seems to not really happen in fifth edition very much because it seems like they travel just to get into a combat.
Well,
Otherwise,
it's not that it can't. It's just that like the that section is always glossed over.
yeah,
Because what that section is all of the things that can happen during a travel, possibly random encounter tables that you can avoid if you're a ranger. Like um, dealing with provisions along the way. Like these are all like things that exist, and there are players and tables where that is, well tracked and covered. But by and large, most player groups and many DMs uh, kind of travel montage that away or just gloss over it.
right.
And because of that, the classes that are supposed to excel at that just don't they lose about a third a or more of their what they do.
Yeah, that's kind of where I've had that kind of issue.
Like,
I've tried to have it with my players where I do have them go get supplies. I do have them go get, food for the travel, how far they're traveling. I try to get them to like plan because I do end up doing encounters that don't always necessarily end up in a combat, but it would be something where I will do perception stuff and I know which players usually are the ones that kind of do that ranger stuff, and see if they choose to avoid it or not. But that does get glossed over quite a bit, especially with a lot of the newer games, because a
yeah.
lot of people tend to push for other things rather than pushing for that. Like
Mhm.
I had my players, I actually had like I had plans turned out like I have plans to come out. I had things where I wanted them to do them a certain way, and they still did them, but they did them in such a fast way that I couldn't plan fast enough to be like,
Yeah.
okay, you guys are going way too fast. You guys are already
And there
getting through
are
it.
and there are some adventures that are built for rangers to excel in. The one that immediately, well, the two that immediately come to mind for me are at the very least the first half or the first two chapters or so of the Tomb of Annihilation, because that's you wandering around the jungles of Chult, and having a ranger there that is well
Knows the
versed in
area.
jungle area or well
Hmm.
versed in dealing with undead because the jungles are crawling with undead and undead dinosaurs and stuff.
Right.
Um,
even having a race that is a like a jungle gnome, I think is a
something.
race. Yeah.
But yeah, something like that, or the Icewind Dale Rime of the Frost Maiden adventure would have been a
Would have been
very
so
good adventure for a ranger
so
to be part
helpful.
of.
A ranger would have been
Um,
so helpful. Oh, I
uh,
have PTSD memories from that. It would have been so helpful.
but again, we didn't have that, but it's fine. The party got by just fine without it. But those are adventures that would have, in my opinion, been been helped well by having a ranger in the party. So it's not like they don't build adventures without rangers in mind. It's just that like it's hard. And
I think they build with I think they'll build certain modules, certain maps and areas and stuff meant for people to have at least one ranger, and then you have players go, "Well, I don't want to be a ranger, so we're not going to have a ranger." They go through the campaign and they go the DM just goes, "You know what would be really helpful right now? A ranger. Ranger would be so helpful right now." And then someone else just goes, "Well, I didn't want to play a ranger."
right, because nobody because it hasn't been fun up until now,
Yeah.
and so no one has one. But anyway, the new 2024 rules uh, update, I believe I've like I said, I've gone over Ranger, and I think they've done right by it this time around.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm hoping so because there are a bunch of things that I wish kind of go better. I know there are people that were complaining about some of the mechanics and rules that they had released on it, and then other things where they nerfed some classes and made other
uh,
classes better or
ev-
something along those lines.
everyone's unhappy when their pet class gets aligned to what would be the correct power level.
Yep, yep.
When you're really excited because your class is super powerful and everyone realizes that and maybe dials it down a little bit, uh, people get angry when their pet class gets dialed down, but everyone else goes, "Look, man, it needed to happen."
Like they just go, finally, it's about time. Like it's about time. We're
Right.
tired of this. We're tired of people making all the warlocks. We need to stop. We need to stop with the hexblade warlocks, please.
But anyway, but yeah, so that's classes. I think we've now covered all of them and more at this point. So uh, that's a good place to maybe wrap it up this evening. For those of you watching later on YouTube, um, let us know. You know what? We'll do an experiment. If you run across this on YouTube, let me know in the comments. We're gonna try something out. Let me know in the comments what your favorite class is and or what your favorite class to not like is and why. I'll take either.
What
I'm
your
kind of
favorite class is to hate on.
yeah. I'll take either. I'll take both. But just
Right.
let me know, and we'll see how it goes. We'll see
Right,
if
right.
anyone is interested in sharing along with us. This, for those paying attention who are interested in seeing what will happen next month, the answer is nothing. We're going to take a break for a couple of months. It's the holiday
Yeah.
season coming up.
Yep.
We've got
Mhm.
our Thanksgivings, our Christmases, our New Year's.
Yeah, it's just
It's going to
easier.
be a big mess trying to get
Yeah.
scheduling stuff together. So
Mhm.
uh, Season 2 of Tavern Talk has ended as of now, I guess, and we'll pick up with Season 3 next year. But between then, we got some stuff planned. There will be at least one Christmas adventure that I've got a little one shot planned for that'll be kind of fun, I think.
Be fun.
Um, right now, our stream group is currently also streaming a Keep on the Borderlands adventure and interestingly enough, we have recently done some tech upgrades so that we can now stream both to Twitch and YouTube at the same time.
Awesome. Congrats. That's awesome.
We experimented with that last night. There were a few tech difficulties that we ironed out about halfway through. It turns out when you stream to YouTube, push to talk beep boops the entire time, and nobody understands why until we narrow it down about halfway through the stream. But but no, adventures in streaming, folks. But anyway, so if you like what we do, would like to see more of it, feel free to follow us either here on Twitch or over on YouTube. Uh, if you want to maybe send a sub our way, if you have one of those spare Twitch Prime subscriptions laying around, or you're an Amazon Prime person and don't know that you have a Twitch Prime subscription just laying around, and you have nothing better to do with it, we can put it to use. Uh, our production budget goes up every time somebody sends us a sub, and it's helpful. But if not, that's fine too. You just hanging out with us is enough to make us happy. Honestly, at this point, if you do want
Right.
to hang out with us, our Discord link is down below with all of the other social media links. Feel free to come visit, hang out. If you're active enough and cool enough, you too could maybe hang out in one of our stream shows and or uh, hang out here in Tavern Talk with us and wax poetic about strange and interesting D&D things on a monthly basis.
Right. Take the
Um,
take the charisma chance.
you could do it. You could do it.
Do the charisma save.
It's fun and easy. I promise.
Yes.
We're nice people to hang out with. But otherwise, thanks for hanging out with us for what was arguably an untitled season two. This is being our second year of doing Tavern Talk, so next year will be our
Isn't it?
third year of doing Tavern Talk, and
Oh wow.
oh my
2 years
gosh, I
already.
know, I know. Um, but it was fun hanging out with everyone, chatting the whole time, and we'll see you next year. So, or well, I guess
Yeah.
if you catch us later on YouTube and there's another episode after it, watch that one. It will have been a year, or it'll have been a few months later. But for you, just one click away. But anyway, thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll see y'all later. Bye.